Every name has a story, and behind every story is a human life. This video is about one name that deserves to be remembered. On September 2nd, 2022, a Memphis kindergarten teacher named Eliza Fletcher left her home before dawn to go for her usual morning run near the University of Memphis campus. She was a 34-year-old mother of 2 young sons, a beloved teacher, and someone who found peace in those quiet early morning hours when the world was still asleep. But that morning, something went terribly wrong. When 7:45 came and went without Eliza returning home, her husband Richard Fletcher III knew immediately that something was off. This wasn't like her. He called the police, and what followed was a desperate search that would grip not just Memphis, but the entire nation. What happened to Eliza Fletcher in those dark morning hours would expose a system that had failed, a predator who should never have been free, and a community that would be forever changed. The investigation moved quickly once police arrived. Officers scoured the area around the University of Memphis campus, where Eliza loved to jog. They pulled security camera footage from every angle they could find, desperately searching for any sign of the missing teacher. Her family, frantic with worry, offered a $50,000 reward for any information that could help bring her home. And then they found it. The footage that would confirm everyone's worst fears. Security cameras had captured the moment when Eliza was approached by an unknown man. The video showed her being forced into the back of a dark-colored SUV. This wasn't a case of someone getting lost or injured during a run. This was an abduction, a violent kidnapping that happened in seconds while most of the city slept. The Memphis Police Department launched a massive manhunt. Every available resource was poured into finding Eliza and identifying her abductor. Investigators combed through the footage frame by frame, looking for any detail that could lead them to the vehicle or the person who took her. They found something crucial at the scene where Eliza was last seen, a pair of sandals. Those sandals would become the key piece of evidence that would crack the case wide open. Police sent them for DNA analysis, hoping against hope that the perpetrator had left some trace of himself behind. The results came back with a match. The DNA belonged to a man named Eliza Fletcher, someone who was already in the system, someone whose name should have sent chills down the spine of anyone who knew his history. Eliza Fletcher was 40 years old at the time of Eliza's abduction. He sometimes went by the last name Henderson. His criminal history stretched back to the 1990s when he was still a juvenile. This was not a man who had made one mistake. This was someone with a pattern, someone who had shown again and again that he was a danger to others. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. Just 1 year before Eliza Fletcher was kidnapped and murdered, Eliza Fletcher had raped another woman. In September of 2021, he held a woman at gunpoint and sexually assaulted her. A rape kit was collected, evidence was gathered, everything needed to put this man behind bars was sitting in a lab somewhere. But it wasn't processed. It sat there, waiting, while Abston walked free. The delay in processing that sexual assault kit would haunt everyone involved in Eliza's case. If that kit had been processed in a timely manner, if Abston had been arrested and charged for the 2021 rape, he would have been in jail on September 2nd, 2022. Eliza Fletcher would have gone for her morning run, come home to her family, taught her kindergarten class, and lived her life. But the system failed. The rape kit sat unprocessed, and a dangerous predator remained on the streets. This failure was so egregious, so unacceptable, that after Eliza's death, the Tennessee legislature passed a new law. They required the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation to issue quarterly reports on sexual assault kit testing times. It was a change that came too late for Eliza, but one that her family hoped would prevent another tragedy. Days passed after Eliza's abduction. The city of Memphis held its breath. Volunteers joined search parties. Flyers with Eliza's picture were posted on every corner. Her students and their families prayed for her safe return. The teachers at her school struggled to explain to young children why their beloved teacher wasn't there. And then the news everyone had been dreading came. Police found Eliza's body near a vacant duplex. The vibrant, kind, faithful woman who had touched so many lives was gone. An autopsy would later reveal that she died from a gunshot wound to the head. She also had injuries to her right leg and fractures to her jaw. The violence she endured in her final moments is almost too painful to comprehend. Cleotha Abston was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and especially aggravated kidnapping. Prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty if he were convicted. The case seemed straightforward. The DNA evidence was solid. The security footage existed. Witnesses had come forward, but as the legal process moved forward, something unexpected happened. Abston's defense attorney, Junie Ganguly, began meeting with his client regularly. For months, they discussed the case, the evidence, and the reality of what Abston was facing. Ganguly later explained that he had been telling Abston for months that they needed to settle the case, that going forward with a trial was not going to end well for him. The evidence was simply too overwhelming. On October 28, 2024, more than 2 years after Eliza Fletcher was murdered, Cleotha Abston stood before Judge Lee Coffey. The courtroom was packed with Eliza's family, friends, and members of the community who had followed this case from the beginning. Abston entered guilty pleas to first-degree murder and especially aggravated kidnapping. When he spoke to the judge, he lowered his head. After entering his guilty pleas, he showed no reaction, no remorse, no emotion, just silence. In exchange for his guilty plea, prosecutors agreed not to seek the death penalty. Judge Coffey sentenced Abston to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He would never walk free again. But this wasn't Abston's only conviction. Just months before pleading guilty to murdering Eliza Fletcher, he had been convicted in the 2021 rape case. Remember that sexual assault kit that sat unprocessed while Abston remained free? It was finally tested after Eliza's murder brought intense scrutiny to the case. In April of 2024, Abston was convicted of raping a woman while holding her at gunpoint in September 2021. On May 17, 2024, he was sentenced to 80 years in prison for that crime. The woman he raped had to live with that trauma for years before seeing any justice, and she had to live with the knowledge that if her case had been handled properly, Eliza Fletcher might still be alive. During Abston's sentencing for Eliza's murder, District Attorney Steve Mulroy read a statement from Eliza's family. It was directed at Abston himself, and the words were powerful. The family said they had no idea what happened to him to turn him into someone so filled with a desire to hurt people. Whatever it was, they said, it does not excuse or explain what he has done. They told him that he had changed their lives forever, that nothing would ever be the same. They called his actions evil. There is no other word for it, they said. He murdered Eliza even though she did nothing to deserve it. She did not hurt him. In fact, she would have been the first to help if he needed it. That last line captures who Eliza Fletcher was. A helper, a teacher, someone who saw the good in people and wanted to make the world better. The Fletcher family also released their own statement after the guilty plea. They said they missed the bright light of Eliza's life every day. They described how her smile radiated happiness, energy, and comfort. They listed all the people whose lives she touched: her husband, her children, her parents, her brother, the rest of her family, her friends, her students, her school families, her fellow teachers, her church community. So many others were moved by countless examples of her faith, kindness, and compassion. Reading those words, you get a sense of the enormous hole left by her death. This wasn't just a tragedy for one family, it was a loss felt by an entire community. In the wake of Eliza's murder, something beautiful happened in Memphis. Runners throughout the city organized an event called Eliza's Run. 1 week after she was abducted, hundreds of people gathered for an early morning run in her honor. They ran the routes she loved. They ran in the darkness she had embraced. They ran to show that fear would not win, that her memory would inspire rather than paralyze. The tradition continued. On the anniversary of her kidnapping, runners in Memphis and other cities have gathered to complete Eliza's Run. It's a powerful tribute to a woman who found joy and peace in those quiet morning miles. It's also a reclaiming of that space, a refusal to let violence define those early morning hours. But the questions remain. How many other rape kits are sitting unprocessed in labs across the country? How many other predators are walking free because evidence hasn't been tested? How many other Elizas are out there, going about their daily lives, unaware that someone who should be in prison is instead planning their next attack? The backlog of untested rape kits in the United States is a national scandal. Estimates suggest there are hundreds of thousands of kits that have never been tested. Each one represents a victim who reported their assault, who went through the invasive process of evidence collection, who trusted the system to pursue justice. And each untested kit represents a potential predator who remains free. Eliza Fletcher's case also raises questions about our criminal justice system more broadly. Cleotha Abston had a criminal history dating back to when he was a juvenile. He had shown a pattern of violent behavior, yet he was out on the streets, able to commit rape in 2021 and murder in 2022. What failures in the system allowed this to happen? Were there opportunities to intervene earlier? Were there warning signs that were missed or ignored? These are uncomfortable questions, but they're necessary ones. If we don't examine what went wrong, we can't fix it. And if we can't fix it, there will be more victims like Eliza Fletcher. The impact of Eliza's death extends far beyond the immediate tragedy. Think about her 2 young sons who will grow up without their mother. Think about her students who lost a teacher who genuinely cared about them. Think about her husband who sent his wife out for a morning run and never saw her alive again. Think about her parents who had to bury their daughter. Think about the woman Abston raped in 2021 who has to live with the knowledge that her assault wasn't taken seriously enough to prevent a murder. The ripples of violence spread wide and touch countless lives. There's also the broader impact on women's safety and freedom. After Eliza's murder, women across the country talked about their own fears when running or exercising alone. They shared their strategies for staying safe. They discussed whether they should give up activities they love because of the danger. This is the insidious effect of violence against women. It doesn't just harm the direct victims. It constrains the freedom of all women, making them calculate risk every time they step out the door. Eliza Fletcher should have been able to go for a morning run without fear. Every woman should be able to do the same. The fact that we can't take that safety for granted is a failure of our society. Yet in the midst of this darkness, there are glimmers of light. The Memphis community came together to support Eliza's family. Strangers became allies in the search for justice. The Tennessee legislature took action to address the rape kit backlog. Runners continue to honor Eliza's memory by refusing to let fear win. These responses don't undo the tragedy, but they show that good people will stand up against evil. They show that communities can come together in the face of horror. They show that change is possible, even if it comes too late for some. Cleotha Abston will spend the rest of his life in prison. He will never again have the opportunity to hurt another person. That's something. It's not enough, but it's something. For Eliza Fletcher's family, no sentence could ever be enough. No amount of time behind bars will bring her back. No guilty plea will erase their pain. But at least they know that the man who took their daughter, their wife, their mother, will never walk free. At least they know that he admitted what he did. At least they don't have to endure a trial where they would have to hear every horrific detail of Eliza's final moments. Small mercies in an ocean of grief. The story of Eliza Fletcher is a tragedy that should never have happened. It's a story of systemic failures, of a predator who was allowed to remain free, of a woman whose life was stolen while she was doing something as simple and innocent as going for a morning run. But it's also a story of a community that refused to forget, of a family that turned their grief into advocacy, of runners who reclaimed the early morning hours in Eliza's name. It's a reminder that behind every crime statistic is a real person with a real life and real people who loved them. Eliza Fletcher was not just a victim. She was a teacher, a mother, a wife, a daughter, a friend. She was someone whose smile radiated happiness and whose faith inspired others. She deserves so much better than what happened to her. We all do. That's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe and be kind to each other.